sealing wax and bureaucracy. Let it sing LQ TS start tonight at Singel Quet at boring history story. Imagine you're a mid-level bureaucrat in 10th century Constantinople, tasked with sending a routine tax report to the imperial treasury. This isn't just about writing a letter, it's a multi-day ritual of wax and whispered prayers that your handwriting won't offend the clerks. Your journey begins in a dimly lit scriptorium, where the air smells of melted beeswax and ink made from crushed oak galls. The parchment before you isn't just paper, it's a carefully scraped sheepskin, smoothed with pumice stone until it gleams like moonlight. You dip your quill, a goose feather, trimmed just so, into iron gall ink, knowing one blot could mean starting over. The content is dull column after column of grain shipments from Thessalonica, but the presentation is everything. Your cursive must mirror the chancery's approved style, with flourishes neither too humble, suspicious, nor too bold, arrogant. 3 drafts later, a senior clerk nods approval. Now comes the sealing, 5 layers of wax, each stamped with a different official's signet ring. The first seal, your department's insignia, is pressed into crimson wax. The second, the treasurer's personal emblem, uses green wax mixed with powdered malachite. By the 5th seal, the emperor's symbolic eyes and ears in print. The document weighs as much as a small book. But you're not done. The sealed letter is wrapped in linen, tied with silk cords, and handed to a courier who may or may not leave today. Weather in the Propontis, he mutters, eyeing the sky. And so your masterpiece joins a cedar chest of equally ornate letters, where it will sit until the winds are favorable. As you walk home past the hippodrome, you wonder if the treasury will even remember why they requested this report by the time it arrives. But that's not your concern. Your duty ends when the wax hardens. The courier's secret codebook. Now that your meticulously sealed tax report is ready, it's time to entrust it to the Byzantine Postal Service network of couriers, monks, and, occasionally, very determined donkeys. But before your letter even leaves Constantinople, it's marked with a series of cryptic symbols, a secret code known only to the imperial messengers. These aren't just random scribbles. They're a carefully guarded system that determines whether your letter will race across the empire or gather dust in a provincial governor's office. The code book, a small parchment scroll carried by every courier, contains about 30 symbols. A tiny anchor means the letter is maritime related and should prioritize coastal routes. A zigzag line indicates mountainous terrain, suggesting the courier should avoid certain passes in winter. But the most dreaded mark? A simple dot, which means low priority. Your tax report, unfortunately, bears this dot. It's not that the content isn't important, it's just that the treasury receives hundreds like it every month. Couriers themselves are a fascinating breed. Many are former soldiers. Their knowledge of roads and shortcuts, invaluable. They memorize the codebook but never write it down, as losing it could mean exile or worse. Some even develop their own shorthand, like a squiggle to denote which officials are known to demand bribes. As your letter is handed off, the courier glances at the dot, sighs, and tucks it into a leather satchel already bulging with similarly marked scrolls. It'll get there eventually, he assures you. Maybe. Meanwhile, a letter marked with a star reserved for military dispatches is already being strapped to a relay horse. It'll change riders 3 times before sunset, each new courier fresh and eager. Your tax report, on the other hand, will travel with the same weary man for days, stopping at way stations where hell share wine and gossip with local officials. The codebook ensures efficiency, but it also ensures hierarchy. And in Byzantium, even the mail knows its place. Donkeys over diplomats. You might assume that immortant letters in Byzantium traveled with diplomats or high-ranking officials, but the truth is far more humble. Your tax report is far more likely to hitch a ride on a mule train than in the saddlebag of an ambassador. The empire's vast network of trade routes, maintained for centuries, doubles as its postal highway. And while diplomats might take detours for political meetings or lavish receptions, mule drivers stick to their schedules mostly. Your letter, still marked with that unfortunate low-priority dot, is handed to a grizzled muleteer named Leo. He's been hauling goods and the occasional scroll between Constantinople and Antioch for 20 years. His mules, sturdy and uncomplaining, are the unsung heroes of Byzantine bureaucracy. They plod through mountain passes, ford rivers, and endure sandstorms without so much as a missed step. Leo, however, is another story. He's known to stop for days at a time if he finds a particularly good inn or a friendly face. The journey isn't glamorous. Your letter spends weeks in a leather pouch, jostling against sacks of cumin, bolts of silk, and jars of olive oil. Leo unloads the mules and sleeps beside them, using the pouch as a pillow. Rain soaks through the linen wrapping, blurring a few lines of your carefully penned report. A curious goat at one-way station even nibbles the corner of the parchment. But Leo isn't worried. He knows the treasury clerks will barely glance at it anyway. Meanwhile, a diplomatic courier carrying a star-marked military dispatch races past on a fresh horse. He'll reach Antioch in half the time. But your letter will get there eventually along with the spices, the gossip, and the faint smell of donkey. In Byzantium, even the mail moves at the speed of trade. Monastery post offices. When winter storms block the mountain passes or bandits make the roads unsafe, your letter, still dutifully following its low-priority dot, finds an unexpected sanctuary, a remote monastery. These quiet havens of prayer and parchment double as unofficial postal hubs, where monks with surprisingly sharp administrative skills take over when the imperial couriers can't or won't brave the elements. Your tax report, now slightly worse for wear after its mule-driven journey, arrives at the Monastery of St. John the Almsgiver, perched on a windswept hill near the Taurus Mountains. The monks here are no strangers to bureaucracy. They've been copying manuscripts for centuries, and their scriptorium is a marvel of efficiency. Brother Theodorus, the monastery's de facto postmaster, examines your letter with a practiced eye. He notes the smudged ink, the goat-nibbled corner, and the faint aroma of cumin. With a sigh, he assigns a novice to recopy the legible portions onto fresh parchment. This isn't charitable. Monastery charges a small fee for this service, payable in wax or ink if coin is scarce. While your letter waits its turn, it joins a growing pile of similarly delayed correspondence, merchant invoices, provincial tax rolls, and even a few personal missives. The monks treat them all with equal care, though they occasionally grumble about the secular world's reliance on paperwork. During particularly bad storms, the monastery becomes a bustling way station, with couriers and traders huddled around the hearth, swapping stories while the monks quietly sort the mail. Days or even weeks later, when the roads thaw or the bandits move on, your letter is handed to a new courier, perhaps a pilgrim or a wool merchant heading east. Brother Theodorus adds a tiny cross in the margin, a monk's blessing for safe travel. It's a small gesture, but in the Byzantine postal system, every bit of help counts. Your tax report, now neatly rewritten, continues its journey, leaving behind the scent of incense and the sound of chanting. The 3-month coffee stain. By the time your tax report reaches the provincial treasury office in Antioch, it has acquired an unexpected companion, a stubborn coffee stain, courtesy of a drowsy clerk in Tarsus. This isn't just any stain, it's a Rorschach blot of bureaucracy. A caramel-colored testament to the delays and distractions of Byzantine administration. The stain obscures a critical line about grain shipments, forcing the treasury scribes to request a fresh copy from Constantinople. And so begins your letter's second journey, retracing its steps with all the urgency of a snail on a leisurely stroll. The coffee culprit, a junior clerk named Nikephoros, had been working late to clear a backlog of Egyptian cotton reports. Armenian coffee, thick as syrup and strong enough to wake the dead, was his fuel. One bleary-eyed midnight, his quill slipped, and the cup toppled. Panicked, he blotted the spill with his sleeve, smearing the ink further. His supervisor, upon discovering the damage the next morning, sighed and filed the letter under pending. 3 weeks later, a memo was sent to Constantinople. Resend tax report 447B. Illegible due to beverage incident. Back in the capital, your department groans at the request. The original scribe, now transferred to naval logistics, is unavailable. New clerk, barely trained, struggles to decipher the surviving portions. The rewritten version contains 3 creative interpretations of the coffee-blurred numbers, none of them correct. By the time this fresh copy reaches Antioch, the grain ships it references have already sailed, some overflowing, others half empty. The treasury, resigned to the chaos, files both versions away. The stain, now dried into a faint brown shadow, becomes a running joke among the clerks. Nikephoros blend, they call it, a shorthand for any document delayed by human error. Meanwhile, the original coffee-stained letter lingers in a drawer, forgotten until a historian centuries later will puzzle over its splotches and wonder what crisis they represented. But for now, it's just another quirk of an empire that ran on paper, wax, and caffeine. Pigeon versus paper wars. In the Byzantine Empire, where bureaucracy moved at the speed of wax seals, an unlikely rebellion was brewing gone, led not by disgruntled officials, but by carrier pigeons, these feathered couriers, long used for urgent military dispatches, had become the bane of the imperial postal service. Your tax report, now on its 3rd copy thanks to Nikephoros' coffee mishap, was caught in the middle of this avian insurgency. The trouble began when provincial governors realized pigeons could deliver messages faster than the lumbering mule trains. A well-trained bird could fly from Antioch to Constantinople in days, bypassing storms, bandits, and bureaucratic delays. Soon, pigeons were carrying everything from tax receipts to gossipy love notes, their tiny scroll tubes bulging with unofficial correspondence. The imperial postmasters, fearing obsolescence, declared war. Pigeon lofts were taxed, and unauthorized birds were confiscated or worse, repurposed as dinner. But the pigeons had allies, monks, merchants, and even a few rebellious clerks secretly maintained their own flocks. Your tax report, marked with the usual low-priority dot, might have languished for months, except a sympathetic monk in Cappadocia slipped a summary onto a pigeon bound for the capital. The bird arrived in record time, only to be intercepted by a postal inspector who promptly ate it. The summary, not the pigeon. The incident sparked a flurry of memos debating whether avian interference was a valid excuse for late paperwork. Meanwhile, the official postal service doubled down on its paper-based system, introducing new seals, stricter codes, and harsher penalties for delays. Your report, now traveling by mule again, became a pawn in this absurd conflict. By the time it reached the treasury, the original grain shipments were ancient history. But the pigeons, they kept flying, their wings whispering a truth the empire refused to acknowledge. Sometimes progress arrives not on parchment, but on feathers. In the dimly lit corridors of the Byzantine bureaucracy, where the scent of ink and wax mingled with the whispers of clerks, your tax report weathered by coffee stains, goat nibbles, and pigeon-related drama finally lands on the desk of a treasury official. But before he breaks the seal, he does something peculiar. He tilts the parchment toward the flickering oil lamp, squinting at the smudges and ink blots. To the untrained eye, these are mere imperfections. They are omens, the art of inkblot divination, known only to senior clerks, was an unofficial but deeply respected practice. A blot near the imperial seal might hint at the emperor's mood. A smudge along the margin could signal delays caused by petty rivalries. Your report, with its accidental coffee ring, is particularly ominous. The official traces the stain's edges, murmuring about financial turbulence and harvest disputes. His junior assistants nod solemnly, though none dare admit they're just humoring him. This ritual wasn't entirely superstition. Byzantine ink, made from oak galls and iron salts, reacted unpredictably to humidity, spills, and even the pH of a clerk's sweat. A blot spreading like a storm cloud often meant the scribe had been rushing, likely under pressure from a superior. A delicate, feathery smear suggested the writer was distracted, perhaps by personal troubles. Your report's coffee stain, though an outlier, falls into a category the clerks call foreign interference, a euphemism for anything from spilled drinks to pigeon droppings. After a hushed conference, the official decides your report is benign but cursed and forwards it to the archives with minimal review. The numbers might be wrong, the details blurred, but the inkblots have spoken. As the parchment vanishes into a cedar chest, the clerks return to their work, leaving you to wonder, in an empire that ran on paperwork, was it the words that mattered, the stains between them? The lost harbor letters. Somewhere in the murky depths of the Bosporus, beneath the hulls of fishing boats and merchant galleys, lies the final resting place of your tax reporter, at least one of its many copies. The harbor at Constantinople was notorious for swallowing paperwork whole. Strong currents, sudden storms, and the occasional overzealous customs inspector tossing contraband or inconvenient documents overboard meant that the seafloor was littered with the empire's administrative ghosts. Your report, already battered by its overland journey, met its fate when a courier skiff capsized in a squall. The linen-wrapped bundle of letters sank like a stone, joining centuries of lost ledgers, love notes, and military orders. Harbor clerks kept meticulous records of these losses, not out of diligence, but because someone had to explain to the emperor why Egyptian grain reports were 6 months late. Their ledgers read like tragic poetry. Shipment 447B, lost near the lighthouse. 12 fathoms. Contents: tax reports, 1 wool cloak, slightly damp, and a jar of pickled figs, possibly salvageable. Divers were occasionally hired to retrieve critical documents, but most letters were left to the currents. Your report, deemed low priority, wasn't worth the effort. Instead, the Treasury simply sent another request to Constantinople, restarting the cycle. Meanwhile, the fish of the Bosporus grew accustomed to parchment. Crabs nested in wax-sealed scrolls, and eels darted through the gaps in broken wooden tablets. Occasionally, a fisherman would haul up a sodden letter in his nets, its ink blurred into illegibility by salt water. These were sold to street vendors, who repurposed them as wrapping for fried anchovies, a fitting end for bureaucracy. Perhaps, as for your tax report, it rests in silence, its numbers fading into the seabed alongside the lost harbor letters of emperors. merchants, and clerks who all thought their words would last forever. Palace paper shortages. In the heart of Constantinople, where the imperial bureaucracy churned through parchment like a hungry beast, your tax report faced its most surreal delay yet, a palace-wide paper shortage. It wasn't that the empire lacked sheep or flax, it was that someone had miscalculated the demand for this year's tax season. The storerooms, usually stacked high with fresh parchment, echoed with the sound of clerks scraping old documents clean for reuse. Your report, already rewritten twice, now risked being erased entirely to make room for more urgent correspondence. The practice of palimpsesting, scraping ink off old parchment to reuse it, was common. But never at this scale. Scribes worked in shifts, hunched over vats of pumice and milk, scrubbing away outdated tax rolls, forgotten poetry, and even a few embarrassing love letters from minor officials. Your report, deemed expendable, was slated for erasure until a junior clerk noticed something odd. The original figures didn't match the resubmitted copy. Had the coffee stain obscured the correct numbers, or had someone fudged them during the rewrite? The question sparked a week-long investigation, during which your report sat untouched, spared the pumice stone by sheer bureaucratic confusion. Meanwhile, the palace scrambled to replenish its supplies. Messengers were dispatched to monasteries, offering wax and ink in exchange for their spare parchment. A shipment of Egyptian papyrus got held up in customs. The paperwork was lost. Ironically, by the time fresh parchment arrived, the tax season was over, and your report was obsolete. The clerks, exhausted, filed it away unread. Months later, a historian would find it in the archives. Its original numbers still faintly visible beneath the scraped surface, a ghostly reminder of an empire that ran out of paper, but never out of problems. A love letter from 902 AD. Amid the chaos of lost harbor letters, pigeon wars, and parchment shortages, your tax report's journey intersects with something far more human. A love letter from 902 AD. Discovered in the archives centuries later, this fragile scrap of parchment written by a junior clerk named Leo to his sweetheart, Theodore, offers a glimpse into the personal lives buried beneath Byzantium's bureaucracy. Unlike your tax report, Leo's letter was never meant for imperial eyes. Its ink is faded, its edges frayed, but its urgency still pulses across the ages. At Sing El Qt, at Meet Me by the Cistern at midnight, bring the apricots. At Singelquet at Theodora, a linen weaver in the city's guild quarter, kept the letter hidden in her loom for years. She never replied in writing. Literacy was rare among women, but the apricot pits found near the cistern suggest she said yes. Their romance unfolded in stolen moments between Leo's shifts at the chancery and Theodora's dawn-to-dusk weaving. The letter, folded tiny to fit in a messenger's pouch, traveled the same roads as your tax report, but with far more care. Leo paid a courier extra to deliver it secretly, bypassing the official postal service altogether. Decades later, when Theodore died, the letter was tucked into her burial shroud. Excavators in the 20th century found it nestled near her ribs, as if she'd carried it close to her heart. Historians now call it at Sing El Qt, at the most human document of the Byzantine postal system at Singelquet, at a reminder that for all its wax seals and bureaucratic codes, the empire ran on whispers, promises, and the occasional basket of fruit. Your tax report, meanwhile, remains in the archives. Its numbers dry as dust, but Leo's letter? It's in a museum, under glass, still defying the empire's obsession with order. Some things, it seems, were never meant to be filed away. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe, and good night.